Right now, think back to the last time you had a drink or two, maybe at a dinner, a celebration, a quiet evening at home. Now think about your face the next morning. Did it look a little puffier around the eyes, a little duller than usual, maybe slightly flushed, even hours later, with no makeup or product involved at all? Almost everyone who drinks even occasionally has noticed this, and almost nobody has ever had it properly explained to them. It's treated as this vague, mysterious thing, oh, that's just what happens, without anyone actually walking through what's happening underneath the surface. Today, that changes. My name is Dr. Elizabeth, and for the past 12 years, I've spent my career helping people understand their skin, not through fear, and not through moral lectures, but through real, evidence-based education. I want to be upfront about something before we go any further. This video is not here to tell you whether or not you should drink. That is entirely your own personal decision, and it's not my place to make it for you. What this video is here to do is something much simpler, and I'd argue much more useful. It's here to explain the actual physiology of what happens to your skin after alcohol, so that whatever choices you make, you're making them with real understanding rather than vague folklore. Before we go further, I want to build a little community around this channel because the comment section genuinely shapes what I cover next. So tell me, where are you watching this from today? And tell me honestly, have you ever noticed a difference in your skin the morning after a drink or two? I read every single comment, and it helps me figure out what to explain next. And if you find this kind of grounded, honest skin education valuable, a quick like on this video genuinely helps it reach more people asking the same questions you are. Now let's get into the biology, because once you understand what's actually happening inside your body, that puffy, dull, flushed morning after look stops being a mystery and starts making complete logical sense. Before we talk about alcohol specifically, I want to quickly walk through how your skin is built, because this foundation makes everything else in this video click into place. Think of your skin as a factory with 3 main levels, and each one has a distinct job. The top level is the epidermis, the thin protective outer layer you can see and touch right now. It's constantly producing new cells, and it acts as your first line of defense against the outside world. Beneath that sits the dermis, a thicker, more structural layer that houses collagen and elastin fibers, blood vessels, and nerve endings. This is the layer responsible for skin's firmness, its ability to bounce back, and much of what gives your face its color and tone. And below that is the hypodermis, a layer of fat and connective tissue that provides cushioning and insulation. For today's topic, the layer that matters most is the dermis, specifically the dense network of tiny blood vessels running through it. These blood vessels are directly beneath the surface of your skin, close enough that changes in their width and blood flow are often visible to the naked eye, especially on the face. This is the piece of anatomy that explains almost everything we're about to discuss. Sitting on top of the epidermis is what dermatologists call the skin barrier. Picture it as the outer wall of a brick house. The skin cells are the bricks, tightly packed together, and between them is a kind of mortar made of natural fats and lipids your skin produces on its own. This barrier does 2 essential jobs. It keeps moisture locked inside your skin, and it keeps outside irritants and environmental stress locked out. When this barrier is well hydrated and intact, skin looks smooth, plump, and even in tone. When it becomes compromised, even temporarily, skin can look dull, dry, or uneven very quickly. Keep this barrier in mind because alcohol interacts with it in a very specific and very well documented way. Now let's connect these 2 systems, the blood vessels in your dermis and the barrier sitting above them, to what actually happens when you drink alcohol. The first mechanism is dehydration, and it happens through a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, or ADH for short. Under normal circumstances, ADH signals to your kidneys to hold onto water and conserve fluid in your body. Alcohol suppresses the release of this hormone. With less ADH circulating, your kidneys release more water than they normally would, which is why alcohol has such a strong diuretic effect, sending you to the bathroom far more often than the volume of liquid you drank would otherwise explain. Research on alcohol's physiological effects consistently shows this fluid loss extends beyond what you actually drank, meaning you can end up in a genuine fluid deficit even if you were drinking a beverage that was mostly water to begin with. Your skin, remember that barrier we just discussed, depends on adequate hydration to look plump, smooth, and even. When your body is running a fluid deficit, skin is often one of the first places that deficit becomes visible, since the body prioritizes sending available fluid to vital organs first. This is a large part of why skin can look noticeably duller, tighter, or less radiant the morning after drinking. It's not damage in a permanent sense, it's a temporary hydration shortfall showing up on the surface. The second mechanism is vasodilation, which is simply the widening of your blood vessels. Alcohol causes blood vessels near the surface of your skin, particularly in the dermis layer we discussed, to dilate temporarily. This is exactly why many people notice a flushed, warm, or reddish appearance in their face while drinking, and sometimes for hours afterward. For some people, especially those with certain genetic variations affecting how their body processes alcohol, this flushing response can be considerably stronger and more visible than in others. Results vary significantly from person to person here, and if you've ever wondered why one friend turns bright red after a single drink while another shows almost no visible change, this variation in blood vessel response and alcohol metabolism is generally the explanation. The third mechanism, and one that's talked about far less often, is alcohol's effect on your sleep architecture. Many people fall asleep quickly after drinking, which creates the impression that alcohol helps with sleep. But research on sleep physiology tells a more complicated story. Alcohol tends to disrupt the later stages of your sleep cycle, particularly REM sleep, even if you don't consciously wake up. This matters enormously for skin, because a significant amount of the skin's natural repair and regeneration work happens during deep sleep stages. Growth hormone release, collagen production support, and cellular repair processes are all tied to quality sleep. When that sleep architecture is disrupted, even without you noticing consciously, skin can wake up looking less rested, with more visible fine lines, puffiness, and a duller overall tone, quite separate from the dehydration and flushing we already discussed. There's a fourth mechanism worth understanding as well, one that connects more directly to inflammation than to hydration or blood flow. When your liver processes alcohol, it produces a byproduct called acetaldehyde, which your body then works to break down further. This entire process places a measurable metabolic load on your system, and research suggests it can trigger a mild, temporary increase in inflammatory markers throughout the body. Skin, being a highly vascular organ with a dense network of small blood vessels running just beneath its surface, tends to reflect this kind of low-grade internal inflammation fairly visibly, often showing up as a subtle overall redness or sensitivity that lingers beyond the initial flushing you might notice while actually drinking. For most people, this response is genuinely mild and temporary, resolving as the body finishes processing the alcohol. But understanding that it's happening helps explain why skin can sometimes feel more reactive or sensitive the day after, even in areas of the face that weren't visibly flushed the night before. Let's talk specifically about puffiness, because this is one of the most commonly asked questions I get about the morning after. Puffiness, particularly around the eyes, happens through a slightly different mechanism than general dullness. When your body experiences that dehydration we discussed, it can actually respond by retaining more sodium and fluid than usual once you rehydrate, especially if what you're drinking alongside alcohol is also high in sodium. Think salty bar snacks, late-night fast food, or savory appetizers commonly paired with drinking. This fluid retention often shows up first and most visibly around the eyes, because the skin there is exceptionally thin, some of the thinnest skin on your entire body, and it has very little supporting fat beneath it to disguise fluid shifts. That combination of thin skin and underlying fluid retention is exactly why eye puffiness tends to be one of the most noticeable next-day effects for so many people. I want to speak directly now to anyone watching this who is over the age of 60, because several of these mechanisms affect you somewhat differently than they affect someone in their 20s or 30s, and understanding that difference genuinely matters. First, the skin barrier we discussed naturally becomes less efficient at retaining moisture as we age, largely due to a gradual decline in natural oil production. This means that same dehydration from alcohol tends to show up more visibly and can take a little longer to fully resolve compared to younger skin, which generally rebounds more quickly. Second, and this is genuinely important, the body's overall capacity to process alcohol changes with age. Total body water content, which is what alcohol distributes through, naturally decreases as we get older. With less water in the body overall, the same amount of alcohol tends to reach a higher concentration in the bloodstream compared to earlier decades of life. This isn't a skin fact specifically, but it directly explains why many people in their 60s and beyond notice that the same amount they used to drink comfortably in their 30s now produces a more pronounced next day effect, both in how they feel and in how their skin looks. Third, sleep architecture. That repair-focused deep sleep we talked about already naturally shifts with age, generally becoming lighter and more fragmented even without alcohol involved. Adding alcohol's sleep-disrupting effects on top of an already lighter natural sleep pattern can compound the next-day appearance of tiredness and dullness more noticeably than it might for someone with deeper, more naturally consolidated sleep patterns typical of younger adults. I think of a retired accountant I'll call Harold, a gentleman in his late 60s who came to one of my community talks a couple of years back. He mentioned, almost as a passing comment, that he'd noticed over the last several years that a couple of glasses of wine with dinner, something he'd done comfortably for decades without any next day effect, now left him looking visibly puffier and more tired the following morning. He genuinely thought something was wrong. Once we walked through exactly what we just covered, the natural age-related changes in body water content, barrier function, and sleep architecture, he told me it was the first time anyone had actually connected those dots for him. Nothing had gone wrong with his body. His body was simply responding to the same input differently than it had 30 years earlier, and understanding that took away a genuine source of worry for him. This same conversation comes up constantly in my community workshops, and I think it's worth sitting with for a moment. So much of the concern I hear from viewers over 60 isn't really about the puffiness or the dullness itself. It's about the fear that something has quietly changed for the worse in their body without explanation. In the vast majority of cases I hear about, what's actually changed is simply the ordinary, well-documented physiology of aging, less total body water, a naturally less efficient skin barrier, and lighter sleep patterns, all interacting with the same familiar habits that used to produce no visible effect at all. Once that mechanism is understood clearly, most people find the situation far less worrying and far more manageable because now they know exactly what they're working with. Now let's talk about what people typically get wrong when they're trying to minimize this next day effect, because I see the same patterns over and over, and correcting them makes a real noticeable difference. This is an extremely common instinct, and it's not wrong exactly, it's just incomplete. Many people wake up feeling dehydrated, drink a large glass of water, and assume the problem is solved. But remember, alcohol doesn't just remove water from your body. It also disrupts your electrolyte balance, particularly sodium and potassium, minerals that your cells actually need in order to hold onto that water effectively once you drink it. Drinking plain water alone without addressing electrolytes can mean much of that water passes through your system relatively quickly, rather than being effectively absorbed and retained by your tissues, including your skin. Many people experience this exact frustration, drinking what feels like plenty of water and still looking and feeling dehydrated hours later. I understand the instinct here completely. Skin looks dull and tight, so the natural response is to slather on the richest cream available. But remember what we discussed regarding the skin barrier. A topical moisturizer works primarily on the surface, helping to lock in whatever moisture is already present and support the barrier itself. It cannot meaningfully replace a systemic fluid deficit happening throughout your entire body. Dermatologists generally recommend thinking of topical moisturizer as a supportive tool that works alongside proper internal rehydration, not as a replacement for it. Using one without the other is a bit like trying to water a plant by misting its leaves while its roots stay completely dry. This is a subtle one that almost nobody thinks about. Remember how we discussed that under-eye puffiness often comes from fluid retention in an area with very thin skin and minimal supporting structure. Sleeping flat on your back, or worse, face down with your face pressed into a pillow, allows fluid to pool more easily in that delicate under-eye area overnight. Many people wake up, notice significant puffiness, and assume it's purely from the alcohol itself, when their sleeping position has actually made a naturally occurring process considerably more visible than it needed to be. This one surprises people every time I mention it. When skin looks dull, tired, or irritated, many people's instinct is to skip their usual sunscreen routine, reasoning that their skin needs a break, or that makeup and skincare products will just irritate it further. But this is exactly backwards. Skin that's already dealing with a temporary compromise in barrier function, as we discussed, is generally more vulnerable to additional stress, not less. Sun exposure on top of that temporarily weakened barrier can compound irritation and dullness rather than giving skin the rest people are hoping for. Let's turn everything we've covered into a practical framework. I want to be honest with you up front. Nothing here reverses the biology we discussed instantly. There is no shortcut around dehydration, disrupted sleep, and temporary vasodilation. But there are genuinely evidence-informed steps that support your body and your skin through that recovery process more effectively. Step 1, rehydrate with intention, not just volume. Alongside water, consider something with a bit of natural sodium and potassium. This could be as simple as a glass of water with a small pinch of salt and a squeeze of citrus, or an electrolyte-containing beverage. This supports your body's ability to actually retain and use that fluid rather than passing it through quickly. Step 2, prioritize your sleep environment that night, even more than usual. Since alcohol already disrupts deeper sleep stages, giving yourself the best possible conditions for whatever sleep you do get, a cool, dark room and an earlier bedtime if possible, helps offset some of that disruption. Step 3, apply a barrier-supporting moisturizer, one containing ingredients like ceramides or hyaluronic acid, in the morning after cleansing gently with lukewarm water. This won't replace internal hydration, but it does help your skin hold on to whatever moisture it currently has more effectively, while your body works on rebalancing itself. Step 4, elevate your head slightly while sleeping if under-eye puffiness is a recurring concern for you. An extra pillow or a slightly inclined position can genuinely help reduce overnight fluid pooling in that thin under-eye area. Step 5, maintain your normal skincare and sun protection routine the next day rather than skipping it. Gentle cleansing, your usual moisturizer, and sunscreen if you're heading outdoors support your skin's recovery rather than adding unnecessary additional stress on top of what it's already managing. I also want to mention the value of timing your last drink relative to bedtime, since this connects directly back to the sleep architecture piece we discussed earlier. Research on sleep and alcohol suggests that the closer alcohol consumption sits to your actual bedtime, the more pronounced its disruptive effect on those deeper, more restorative sleep stages tends to be. Simply building in a longer gap between your last drink of the evening and when you actually go to sleep, even just an extra hour or two, gives your body more time to begin processing the alcohol before sleep begins, which many people find noticeably reduces how disrupted their sleep, and consequently how tired and puffy their skin feels the following morning. It's also worth mentioning food, specifically what you eat alongside alcohol, rather than only what you eat afterward. Consuming a meal with a reasonable amount of protein and healthy fats before or during drinking slows the rate at which alcohol is absorbed into your bloodstream. A slower absorption rate tends to produce a gentler overall physiological response, less dramatic vasodilation, a more gradual dehydration process, and generally a milder next-day effect on the skin compared to drinking on a completely empty stomach, where alcohol is absorbed rapidly and its effects tend to be more pronounced and more abrupt. I want to address something honestly here, because I think it matters more than any single tip I've given you. Everything we discussed today describes what happens after alcohol consumption in general, and results vary considerably depending on how much was consumed, individual body chemistry, hydration status beforehand, and overall health. Occasional moderate drinking paired with good hydration habits tends to produce a mild, temporary version of what we discussed, something that typically resolves within a day or so as your body naturally rebalances. Research on regular, heavier alcohol consumption shows a different picture entirely, one where these temporary effects on hydration, blood vessels, and sleep can compound over time and contribute to more persistent changes in skin appearance and overall health. I'm not here to tell you where your own personal line should be. That's a conversation between you, your own health history, and ideally, your doctor. What I want you to walk away with is simply a clear, honest understanding of the mechanism, so that whatever choices you make, you're making them with real information rather than guesswork. I also think it's worth mentioning that the skin changes we've discussed today are, biologically speaking, temporary and reversible for the vast majority of people who drink occasionally and in moderation. This is genuinely different from some of the more permanent, structural skin changes that research has associated with sustained, heavy alcohol use over many years. Changes involving prolonged inflammation and its effects on collagen over time. I mention this distinction not to alarm anyone, but because understanding where the line generally sits between a temporary next morning appearance and something more long-term helps put a single evening's puffiness into proper, reassuring perspective. One night of dullness or flushing is your body's completely ordinary, short-term response to a temporary physiological load. Nothing more dramatic than that. Before we close, I want to offer a gentle, honest note. The temporary puffiness, dullness, or flushing we discussed today is, for most people, a completely normal and short-lived response that resolves on its own within a day or two. However, if you notice persistent facial redness that doesn't fade, significant swelling that doesn't improve, or if you have any concerns about how much you're drinking or how your body is responding to it more broadly, those are genuinely worth a conversation with your doctor. This isn't meant to alarm you, it's simply the responsible, honest thing to mention, because a small number of situations do benefit from a professional's perspective. And your doctor is always the right person to have that particular conversation with. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. That puffy, dull, or flushed appearance you sometimes notice the morning after a drink or two isn't random, and it isn't a sign of some hidden problem. It's the direct, well-understood result of temporary dehydration, widened blood vessels near the surface of your skin, and disrupted sleep architecture. 3 mechanisms working together in a completely predictable way. Understanding that alone tends to remove a lot of the confusion and worry that so many people carry around this topic. If you want to support your skin through that recovery process, focus on genuine rehydration with electrolytes, prioritize your sleep environment, support your skin barrier with the right moisturizer, and keep your normal skincare and sun protection routine intact rather than skipping it. Small informed choices tend to make a real difference here. If this video helped you understand your own skin a little better, that genuinely is the entire purpose of this channel, and I would love for you to consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Tell me in the comments what topic you'd like me to break down next, and as always, take good care of that remarkable, hardworking skin of yours. I'll see you in the next video.